So in this video, we're going to start building a to-do application with HTMX. Yeah, a simple task management application with HTMX, where if you have programmed a thing or two, you should be familiar with a to-do application. And it's like the rite of passage to learning any type of programming language or any type of front-end framework. Is like the unofficial rite of passage. And even for HTMX, is in the HTMX community, writing to-do applications is a big deal. So we're going to be building a to-do application, and to do that, we're going to need a database. I have already set up my SQL. I have my SQL running in a Docker container, but you can use any database of your choice, Postgres, MS SQL, you can use any of your choice, but I am going with MySQL because I'm more familiar with MySQL. Like I said, I have it running in a Docker container. You can do that if you don't want to mess up any other default MySQL installation on your system, or you just want to keep things, you don't want to mess up things around your system. You don't want applications installed all over. So Docker gives you a way to do that cleanly. Running this is the command. You first have to have Docker installed. Then I run this command, docker run. I give it the name, demo MySQL, and I pass it the password, which is root. And I map the port. I'm mapping port 333 to the default MySQL port 3306. This is the port inside of the MySQL container. So I'm mapping it to port 333 on my system, and I'm getting the latest version of MySQL. So this command is going to get everything set up for you. It's going to pull the image if you don't already have it available. It's also going to set the password and map the port, and have the container running. The container will start running immediately. For example, if I go to my command line now, if I do sudo docker ps, it wants my password, that's fine. So as you can see, I have the MySQL container running. Demo MySQL, that's the name I gave it, and it has been running now for the past 22 minutes. So yeah, I have MySQL set up, and I'm going to be managing that with MySQL Workbench. That's why you've been seeing this interface. I'm going to be managing that with MySQL Workbench, and the first thing we're going to do is create a table. We're going to create a table where we're going to store our tasks, the tasks in our to-do list. So here on the side menu, tables, we can right click and click create table, and here I'm just going to call this table tasks. That should be fine. And from here, I can start defining my fields, the fields in my table. I wish I could make this larger. Let me see if I can do. Oh, I don't think I can. So the first column we're going to have is the ID column. I want an ID for each task. To be a type int, I want it as a primary key, not null, definitely, and I want it auto incrementing. So I'm just going to, click this. Auto incrementing. So it's a primary key, not null, and it auto increments. The next field is going to be task, which is going to hold the task itself. I'm going to give this varchar 200. Should be fine. Definitely not null also, but I'm just going to leave the default. Then I'm also going to add a field called done. This is going to be a Boolean field, so you can toggle whether the task is done or not. This will be int. Yeah, this will be int. And I'm going to give it a default. I would like to give it a default. Default express. Okay, so I can come here and say default. Default is 0. So if it is 0, then it is not done. The task is not done. If it is 1, the task is done. So that's how we manage that. This is the simple schema we're going to have for our to-do app. And to get that set up, I'm just going to come down here and click apply. Yeah, it shows me the query. Everything looks good. I'm going to click apply again, and yep, we now have our table. The query has successfully executed, and we now have our table. Can close this. Now, if I expand here, I can see my tasks table. I can decide to fetch the first 1000 rows. Definitely not in there. Let's see if you can see this. Let's see this table with some tasks. So let's say I have the first task. I'm going to be creating a task list for this video, this set of videos I'm doing. So that's every video in this particular building a to-do app series. So yeah, the first task will be to plan the video. So I'll just say plan video. Sorry, I really wish I could make these things bigger. Still trying to see if I can. Nah, still not allowing me to make it bigger. So plan video should be 0 by default. Then 2, I have to record the video. To record the video, that's also not done yet. And 3, I'm to edit the video. So edit video. This should fill in by default, but I'm just going to put 0 here myself. So we plan the video, we record the video, and we edit the video. All good. So this, we are seeding our table with some tasks so that we can see some tasks right away. To apply this, I'm just going to click apply. It shows me all the queries, and click apply to execute the SQL statement. And yep. Now if we go to our table tasks and we tell it to fetch us the first 1000 rows, yeah, we now have those records. So we have records for our to-do app. We can start building the app right now and leave this very tiny MySQL workbench interface. By the way, if you want to get my MySQL workbench, it is free on their website. You can get it and use it to manage your MySQL, or you can also connect to your Docker container. You can use Docker to connect to your Docker container and use the command line tool to run your MySQL. But I like GUIs when I'm teaching, so yeah. Except I'm teaching the command line tool. But I love GUIs when I'm teaching this. It helps the learning experience. So we have our database seeded up. Now let's create our Node.js project. So let me just clear this. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to make a directory for our Node.js project. To do app. Make a directory. So that's good. The next thing we're going to do, let's go inside that directory. To do app. Nice. And let's initialize this as a Node.js project. So I'm going to do npm init-y. npm init-y. So the -y flag is going to make sure that I don't have to go through the entire interactive process that npm init does. So I just keep everything and accept the default. So let's hit enter. And with that, we have our package.json scaffolded. Cool. So we can clear up this. We can clear this up. And the next thing we're going to do is to start installing our dependencies. Yeah, the dependencies for this project. The packages we're going to be needing in this project. So this is going to be a web server. And so I'm going to need Express. So say npm install Express, because I want to use Express as my web server. So I'm going to need Express. Next thing I'm going to need is cause, to just make sure that it's helping me take care of all the cause errors. I don't want to have to deal with all that. Yeah. So we have that. And because HTMX expects you to return HTML, yeah, it expects you to return hypermedia, which is the original definition of the original design of the REST architecture and the web itself. So we need a templating engine. A templating engine will really help us to return our HTML and also be able to do some logic within our templates. So for that, I'm going to be using EJS. Yeah, I'm going to be using EJS. It's just fantastic. So I'm going to be going with EJS as my templating engine. But if you have proficiency in another templating engine, you can always use that. And everything we do, you can replicate it in another templating engine. It's just simple stuff. No EJS specific stuff. So yeah, we have that. And because we're going to be working with a database, we need the MySQL driver. Working with MySQL database, so we need the MySQL driver. If you're working with a different database, you need to get the driver for that particular database. But here we're using MySQL, so we get MySQL, and we get the MySQL 2 package because it has a promise interface. I want to use async await. I love async await. So yeah, we'll be using MySQL 2. So let's install these guys. These are like our Avengers. Let's install them and let's get started. So it's installing. Dun, 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 dun. Yep, and before you know it, with the power of npm, everything is done installing. So that's awesome. We can now go into our folder. Yeah, we can now go into our project folder. We can now open this in Visual Studio Code. So I'm just going to go to Visual Studio Code. Go up here, click File, Open. and this should document. So we should come here. No, not here. No, here. And to do app. Yeah, to do app. So to do app, we're going to be opening our to do app. Just going to click open. Yep, that is displayed. That is now displayed. So we are in our project. We have our node modules folder. If we check package.json, you can see all the stuff that we just installed. We have cause, we have EJS, we have Express, and we have MySQL too. Awesome. So let me just okay, let's close this. Now the first thing we're going to do, let's create a folder for our templates. Let's create a folder for our templates. So EJS expects all our templates to be inside this views folder. So I'm going to create a views folder. And inside that folder, I'm going to create a templates folder because I just like calling my templates folder that. But you know, EJS wants views. So I do views, then inside views I have templates. So that represents all my HTMX templates. All our HTMX templates are going to live inside here. So that's all good. We have this folder set up. We're going to be coming back to it much later. The next thing we're going to do is to get our server code in place. Let's start writing our server. So I'm going to create a new file and we'll call that server.js. And here is where we're going to be writing all our server code. This is where we're going to be writing all our server code. So the first thing we want to do is bring in all our packages, all the packages that we need. So the first package to come in is going to be Express. So we'll just bring in Express equals require Express. Okay. So we also want the cause package. So let's bring that in also. Cause. And we want the MySQL package, which we're just going to give the name MySQL, but we know we're referencing the MySQL 2 package. So MySQL 2. And what next? Yeah, we need to get the promise interface of the MySQL 2 package. Yeah, the promise interface. So MySQL 2 package, and the next one, the last one will be the body parser. We don't need to bring EJS in, it's just going to operate in the background once we use it as a middleware. So let's get body parser, require body parser. We need body parser because we're going to be using forms, and HTMX requires that you set it to URL encoded. Yeah, so you set your server to receive URL encoded data from the request. So yeah, we're going to be using body parser to do that. So now that we have our packages in, the next is to create our Express app. With our Express app, we say no const app equals Express. Okay, so we get our in. Oh no, there, not there. Okay, const app is equals to Express. Let's get the middlewares out of the way. First, let us set body parser. So we say app.use body parser dot URL encoded, and we just open a bracket, open a curly braces, and say extended true. Okay, extended true. So we have body parser set up. Next, let us set up cause. Say app.use cause. Call it as a function, and that should help us take care of all the basic cause issues. So we have app.use cause, and next, let us set our templating engine. Set our templating engine. We chose EJS, so let us set our templating engine to be EJS. So I'm going to say app.set and use the string view engine, and that view engine will be EJS. So app.set view engine EJS. We have that set up. Pretty cool, huh? So we have our app. We set up body parser, we set up cause, and we have set up our view engine to be EJS. So with all this set up, what is the next thing to do? Well, let us set up our connection to MySQL. Let's just get that out of the way so that we can just start using it in our routes. So let's say set up MySQL connection. For some of you, that might be Postgres connection, so just use whatever is appropriate. So let's begin setting up our MySQL connection. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a function, a sync function. Sync function. and that function is going to be called connect to MySQL. Aptly named connect to MySQL. So that'll be the name of my function. So yep, we have this function in place, and inside this function I'm going to create a connection variable and set that equal to my MySQL connection definition. So I'm just going to say await, call the MySQL package, and call the create connection function. And pull this aside, yeah, so that we can get more space here. So MySQL.create connection, and inside here I'm going to open it and pass in the configuration object for my connection to MySQL. The first thing I will need is the host, and I'm on my system, so that is localhost. You can also use the IP address if you want. The next thing is the port. Remember we made a port mapping to the container. Inside the container, MySQL runs by default on 3306, but we mapped it to 333 on our system, so that's what you put here. So 333. What next? The user. Our user is root. Our user is root, and our password, if you remember from the MySQL setup, that's the Docker command. Our password, I also set that to be root. So remember to replace this with your own username, your own password, but most probably your own custom mapping. Yeah, and the next thing we want is the database. We just want to pick the database from here. We're going to be using one database, so we can just pick it from our configuration. That database is going to be testdb. That's the name we give our database. Let's double check that. Let's go to Workbench. Testdb. Yeah, testdb. That's our database. Okay, so that's cool. We have the connection here, and we just return the connection. So we can then use this connection handle for all our queries. So I'm going to save that. And with that saved, you can come down here. I'm going to create a db variable. So let db, and I'm just going to call this function. This connect to MySQL function, so that it is immediately called. Once our app runs, it makes a connection, and we can start using that connection. So I'm just going to create a self-invoking function. Here, and inside here I will say sync, create the arrow function that is going to be invoked, and inside this arrow function, I'm just going to say db equals await connect to MySQL. So once our application runs, this function is going to be invoked, and it's going to set the value of this db variable to the call to our connect to MySQL function, which returns a connection object. So this db is going to be our handle on that connection. So we have that in place. Yep, MySQL connection done. What next? The next thing we will do to wrap up this section, because we're almost done, I'm sure a lot of you just want to see some HTMX code. So to wrap up this section, what we're going to do is simply create a base route, just to test things out. So create a base route. We'll give it the usual callback. I don't know if we're going to be calling any database function here yet, so I don't know whether to put a sync there, but I'll just say request, and we're just going to send back a message. So welcome to the HTMX to do app. Welcome to the HTMX to do app. And with that in place, we can define our port. Say process.env.port. Telling it first try to pick the port from the environment. If you don't find it, then use 3000. So use 3000 if you cannot find the port, which it will use in this case because we're not setting any port in our environment variables. So lastly, we do app.listen. We give it the port, and we'll supply the callback. It's going to print a message to the console, and that message will be app is now running on port, and we just give it the value of our port. App is now running on port. So with this, this gives us the message in the console that the app is now running, and this guy will also give us a message if we decide to go to this route. So just make sure that everything is working fine. So let's save that. Let's run through this once again. What did we do? First, we brought in our packages. We created an Express app. We set up body parser and cores as middlewares. We set our view engine to EJS, and we also defined a function for our MySQL connection. We called it and set it to a publicly available variable that we can use in our routes. And we created a base route. To just print a message to the browser or to the client. And we defined a port and made the app to listen on that port. And also remember our templates folder. There's no way you can forget because we'll keep coming back to this. But don't remember to create that. Don't forget to create that, rather. Don't forget to create that. And also remember all the table we created and the fields, the ID field, the task field, the done field, and we seeded it with some items. So now let us test out our server. Let's test out our Node.js server. So I'm just going to say node server, and hope things doesn't blow up. Enter. App is now running, which means it's successfully called our connection to MySQL and it didn't fail. So that's why we can have this without error. And now if we go to our browser, let's click this and let's go to, I think I might have to escape this. Yes, just full screen. Interesting. Yeah, I want this. Okay, so if I go to localhost 3000, welcome to the HTMX to do app. Yep, welcome to the HTMX to do app. Hope I have this at 150. Yeah, welcome to the HTMX to do app. So our base application is up and running. Now we can start writing some HTMX